All right, today we're pulling back the curtain on one of the absolute wildest events in modern publishing. In this explainer, we aren't just looking at a popular book. We are diving deep into why the success of the Da Vinci Code fascinates as a massive global phenomenon, one that completely blurred the lines between reality and fiction. We're going to explore how a single mystery thriller captured the world's attention, sparked international outrage, and literally created its own spin-off economy, all by tapping into our deepest psychological fascination with hidden history.
To really wrap our heads around the scale of what we're talking about, let's just start with this number, 80 million. That is how many copies the Da Vinci Code had sold worldwide by 2009. It was translated into 44 different languages. It wasn't just a bestseller. It was this unavoidable cultural monolith. Whether you were in a bookstore in New York, a cafe in Paris, or a market in Beirut, this book was everywhere. So how exactly did it get to that point?
Well, here is our roadmap for today. We're going to break down this phenomenon by looking at its meteoric literary success, the illusion of truth it crafted, the intense backlash from the church, the resulting censorship and controversies, and finally, its lasting cultural legacies.
Okay, let's jump right into part one, a meteoric literary success.
When Dan Brown dropped this novel in March of 2003, it became a monumental hit almost overnight. To give you an idea, for all of 2003, it was outsold by literally only one other book, and that was J.K. Rowling's massively anticipated Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. And the reason it blew up so fast? Dan Brown managed to mash up art, cryptology, and alternative history into this incredibly fast-paced thriller. You followed symbologist Robert Langdon and cryptologist Sophie Neveu from a murder scene at the Louvre in Paris right into a relentless treasure hunt that felt, and this is the key part, it felt incredibly grounded in real-world art and architecture.
Which brings us nicely to part two, the illusion of truth, fact versus fiction.
The true engine behind this phenomenon was a really brilliant but highly controversial narrative trick. When you cracked open the Da Vinci Code, the very first thing staring back at you was a page boldly titled Fact. Brown explicitly stated that all descriptions of artwork, architecture, documents, and secret rituals in this novel are accurate. He also claimed that the Priory of Sion, this mysterious French secret society, was a real organization founded back in 1099. But, well, this is where the academic consensus takes a sharp left turn. Historians widely confirm that the Priory of Sion was actually a notorious hoax whipped up in 1956 by a guy named Pierre Plantard. By blending actual, tangible things like the Louvre and the Mona Lisa with completely fabricated histories presented as absolute fact, Brown completely hooked his readers.
Now, when historians and critics inevitably push back, Dan Brown didn't back down. He fully stood his ground. He stated, "The secret behind the Da Vinci Code was too well documented and significant for me to dismiss." In television interviews, when people asked him just how much of the underlying history was true, he'd often reply, "Absolutely all of it." He further blurred those lines by publicly stating his belief that the alternative historical theories discussed by his fictional characters actually had genuine merit. So for the everyday reader sitting on their couch, it became nearly impossible to figure out where the textbook ended and the thriller began.
Of course, on the flip side, critics were not having it. Laura Miller from the New York Times hit back hard, describing the novel's historical foundation as being based on a notorious hoax, and frankly calling it rank nonsense and bogus. But here is the really fascinating part about all this. This intense, heated polarization between the book's claims and the academic consensus, it didn't hurt sales at all. Actually, the endless debates over what was fact and what was fiction just made people want to read the book even more, just so they could be part of the conversation.
So let's move on to part three, the church's anger and the religious backlash.
You see, the theories tucked inside this book struck right at the very heart of established religious doctrine. Neutrally speaking, the central plot explored a hypothetical alternative history that suggested the Merovingian kings of France were descended from a holy bloodline, specifically making the claim that Jesus Christ and Mary Magdalene had a child together. On top of that, the novel portrayed real-life Catholic institutions, particularly Opus Dei, in a highly secretive, almost sinister light. For many believers and religious leaders worldwide, this was definitely not just a fun beach read. It was viewed as a direct and deeply offensive rewriting of the origins of Christianity itself.
And this outrage wasn't just a bunch of bad reviews in the Sunday paper. It led to very severe, real-world consequences.
The Vatican strongly and publicly criticized the book. Over in Lebanon, Catholic leaders actually successfully petitioned government censors to officially ban the novel. In India, widespread protests by Christian communities who argued the book outraged their religious feelings led to outright temporary bans in states like Andhra Pradesh. To a lot of people, the book was viewed as a literal attack, and it sparked a massive cultural clash across the globe.
This perfectly sets up Part 4, Trials, Censorship, and Controversies, or what I like to call the controversy machine.
Because, ironically, all these fierce controversies acted as a giant multiplier for the book's sales. If we track the timeline, you can see a rapid, global escalation. The book drops in 2003. Fast forward to 2005, and high-profile plagiarism lawsuits are making international headlines. Then, by 2006, right as they're gearing up to release the Ron Howard blockbuster film adaptation starring Tom Hanks, the global bans and religious protests hit an absolute fever pitch. Every single time a country banned it, or a church leader denounced it, or a new lawsuit was filed, it generated front-page news. It created this incredibly powerful, self-sustaining hype machine.
And looking a bit closer at those legal battles, this phenomenon was so insanely lucrative that it naturally attracted intense scrutiny. The most famous was a major copyright lawsuit from the authors of a 1982 book called Holy Blood, Holy Grail. They claim Brown basically stole their historical architecture for his novel. There was even another lawsuit from a Russian scientist. Ultimately, Dan Brown won these legal battles, but the televised court cases did something arguably more valuable. They kept the core mysteries of the book squarely on the public eye for years.
Finally, let's wrap things up with Part 5, the legacy of a phenomenon and the spin-off economy.
What's truly wild is that this single novel didn't just sell itself. It basically sold a whole new genre of media. Because the book blurred fact and fiction so effectively, millions of readers were left totally hungry for the truth. And this spawned a massive spin-off economy. I mean, entire books, documentaries, and study guides, like Josh McDowell's A Search for Answers, were published solely to debunk or decode the claims made in Brown's universe. It sparked a genuine renaissance of interest in Renaissance art, early Christian history, and the concept of the sacred feminine. The book quite literally created its own ecosystem of literature.
Ultimately, the Da Vinci Code leaves us with a really provocative final question to chew on. We've seen the 80 million sales, the international outrage, the high-stakes lawsuits, but the true legacy of this phenomenon is realizing just how easily human memory and our understanding of history can be swayed by a captivating story. Think about it. When a wildly entertaining thriller places a fact page at the front of a fictional book, does it have the power to permanently rewrite public memory? Next time you sit down with a historical thriller, you might just want to ask yourself, how much of what I'm reading is history, and how much is just a beautifully crafted illusion? Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning what you read.